Hello, beautiful people. It's Deborah Blake, in case you couldn't tell by my name and the fact that we sent you an email that said, look, it's Deborah Blake. Welcome to Spellcasting Basics. Thank you for showing up on a Saturday. Alicia, hello. That's my editor. She helps make all my books really, really good. Before that, they're sort of... So spellcasting is one of my favorite things to write about, to do. Some of you may have my very old book, the Everyday Witch A to Z spell book, which was the first spell book I wrote, although there were spells in the previous book. And I just got the first copy of Llewellyn's little book of Spellcraft, which will be out in early July 8th, I believe. They managed to snag one out of the warehouse so I could show it off to all of you. So why do I write about spellcasting? What makes it so important? To me, first of all, it's one of the things that sets witches apart from everybody else. If you walk up to your average person on the street and say, when's the last time you cast a spell? Well, first of all, they're probably going to look at you like you're crazy. But second of all, they're going to go, oh, I don't cast spells. What are you talking about? That's for witches. So this is one of the things that we do. And not everybody who practices witchcraft casts spells. That's absolutely fine. Some people are not comfortable with it. Some people don't feel the need for it. Some people just don't have it as a part of their practice. For me, it is one of the tools that is in our witches toolkit. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. First of all, I'm going to show off my beautiful Llewellyn water bottle. I love this thing. You're going to see it a lot. So we're going to talk about what a spell is, what the rules of spellcasting are, if any, and that I will tell you already, that will differ depending on who you ask. When you should cast a spell, when you shouldn't cast a spell, why it's a good idea to create your own spells if you can, if you feel like it, if you can't get my books, and how to actually cast spells. Now, I want to tell you right away, this is a class I normally teach over the course of 3 days. So A, I'm going to talk really fast. And B, I'm going to sort of cover a lot of things in a short period of time. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. If I don't happen to see them in the chat, because the chat moves very fast, I will have some time for questions and answers at the end, so don't panic. I will try and answer your question. So we're going to start with a really simple question. What is a spell? And again, if you ask 10 different witches, you'll probably get 10 different answers, because that's witchcraft, and that's okay. I like that. For me, the definition of a spell is it is a series of written or spoken words used with the intent of creating a particular outcome and or to address deity. That's pretty simple. Written or spoken words, there's an intent behind them. You're trying for a particular outcome, or you're talking to the gods, or both. Many spells use some form of ritual and various objects to symbolize the spell's intention and to focus the caster's will, but those things are optional. You can just stand in the middle of the woods or your backyard and say a spell without anything else. At its simplistic, a spell is much like a prayer or an affirmation. When non-witches ask me to explain spells, and they think they're scary, I say it's pretty much like a prayer. You're sending it out to the gods, to the universe, have whatever you want to call it, God with a capital G, and you're asking for help usually. Sometimes you're saying thank you, but usually you're asking for something. To give you a really simple example. So, for instance, you're going to take a shower. I hope you do that occasionally. Once every month, whether I need to or not. So if you stand in the shower in the evening and say, water, water, wash away all the worries of the day. The thing that makes this a spell, as opposed to just some words that you say in the shower, is your intent, your focus, and your will. So you have, instead of just standing there in the water, you have your intent, your goal, which is to wash away the stress of the day, your focus. So as the water rains down on you, you're going to visualize things being washed away. And your will, which you apply your energy to the task. Those things working together move this simple shower to a new and magical level. So that's really the basics of spellcasting. You're taking intent, focus, and will, coupling them with words, written or spoken, or both, and putting it out into the universe. So once you've got that basic part down, where do you go from there? I like to think of spells as the witch's power tools. I don't know if any of you use power tools at home, but the energy for this power tool is supplied by our will rather than by electricity. Like any other tools, spells are only as good as the skills of those who wield them. And if used incorrectly, they can actually backfire and cause harm, which obviously you don't want. Which is, why you want to go into spellcasting thoughtfully, rather than just going, woohoo, I've just started, doing this stuff. I'm going to cast spells. They are powerful. That's why we do them. And so you want to be careful. That doesn't mean not to do them. It just means think about what you're doing. So the quality of the spell will affect the outcome. And the better the spell, the more likely you are to achieve your end result that you want. It's important to choose your words carefully. One of my favorite examples is you don't want to cast a love spell, which I don't like love spells anyway. I'll get into that maybe later. But if you're going to cast a love spell, you don't want to say that you want Mr. Right, because you might end up with a guy whose last name is Right. Now, I have a friend who married a guy whose last name was Right, and it worked out great. But in general, you want to choose your words carefully because words have power. That's one of the beliefs that witches have, is that words have power. That's why we use them for magic, and that's why they are our power tool, or one of our power tools. And keep in mind that not only do you want to pick your words carefully, but that without your will to add oomph to the spell, you're just standing in the shower getting wet. That's basically the difference. So here's a subject for debate, and everybody gets to make up their own mind, because that's witchcraft. There is no one hard and fast rule about anything in witchcraft, including how you spell magic. So, but people ask me all the time, what are the rules for spell casting? These are the rules that I was taught. These are the rules that I follow. Not everybody who considers themselves to be a witch agrees with these rules, and you get to just make your own decisions about what you think the rules should be. But if you're just starting out, or if you've been practicing for a while but aren't really comfortable with spellcrafting, then here's a good place to sort of take a look at things. My first rule is harm none. Sort of like in the Wiccan Rede, and it harm none, do as ye will. Now, I was taught by a Wiccan. I these days mostly consider myself to be sort of a eclectic witch. Somebody likes my Baba Yaga fiction books. Mwah, blessings. I love those books. There's magic in those too. Different kind of magic. Why do we do harm none? First of all, it's it's a pretty complicated idea. How do you know if what you're doing is going to harm somebody or harm yourself? Because remember that harm none also has to do with whether you're harming yourself. I try and say to people, focus on creating positive change. Positive change, whether for you or for the universe in general, means you're not causing harm. If you can't create positive change without bringing somebody else down, you need to really look at your motivation and what it is you're trying to achieve. So yes, Venus Queen says harm none is ambiguous. It is. It is a really tough concept. And I do not have time. We could spend a whole class just talking about what harm none means. What I can say is do not purposely do a spell that would harm somebody. So for me, and again, this is a place where people disagree, I do not use hexes. There are plenty of witches that do, and they feel that there are instances that justify that. That's one of those things that you have to decide for yourself. But I don't do it. Part of the reason for that is the second rule is not to interfere with free will. And that's another tricky one. If you are casting spells that affect you, you are only working on your own will, and that's, you're making choices for yourself. You can't make choices for other people. How would you like it if somebody cast a spell on you to make you do something? I don't think you'd like it at all. If somebody interfered with your free will, you'd be pretty peeved. I'd be pretty peeved. So the best rule of thumb is when you cast a spell, Scarlett's asking, is a return to sender spell considered a hex? No, absolutely not. That's their stuff they put out. You're just sending it back. That's defensive, not offensive. That is absolutely fine. That is not a problem. Then that's a whole nother class. But no, that's, you're just basically saying, I'm not accepting this crap you're sending towards me, just like you would with anybody who badmouths you. So, again, not everybody follows these rules. One of the major beliefs that many of us share on one level or another is that what you put out comes back to you. Some people call that the rule of three, where it comes back to you 3 times. Some people call it the law of returns. But you do want to be very careful of putting negative stuff out there, malicious stuff, because it can bounce back and come at you. And to be honest, I'm not sure that most of that stuff really works. Let's face it, there are a lot of witches who do not like certain public figures, we're going to say, and have been hexing them from day one. They're still around. They're still doing their thing. Concentrate on you. Concentrate your magic on what you can do to improve your life, to improve the world around you, and let everything else take care of itself. If you want to create positive change in the world by being politically active, by marching with a sign to support, the people that you want to support, that's great. Don't use spells for that. Use spells to improve your own life. You can sometimes use them to improve somebody else's life, but only with their permission because of that free will issue. For instance, a lot of people say, well, my mom is really sick. I want to do a healing spell for her. That sounds like a no-brainer, right? Well, what if the mom is a Christian and does not want a witch casting a spell, no matter how helpful it might be and no matter how good the intention is? That is still interfering with free will, and you can't do it. It's not a good idea. Deborah says no. So now, if you say to somebody, I would like to help you with this, is it okay if I cast a spell asking for positive energy to be sent in your direction? And they say yes, then absolutely you are free to do that. But you must ask first to make sure that you are not interfering with free will, because, let's face it, we don't want anybody to do that to us. Okay, so, this is a powerful tool. You want to use it with care. You wouldn't walk around with a chainsaw just whacking at things. Well, you might. I don't know all of you personally. I wouldn't advise it. It makes a big mess. Philip says, on the other side of the coin, there was that gathering during World War II that cast a spell against the. Yeah, I mean, there may be times, but that was defensive. The spell those witches cast was not an offensive spell, that, as I understand it, it was a keep us safe, make them go away spell. So there you go. So now that you know these basic rules and you know how powerful spell casting is, how do you decide whether or not a situation is one during which you should cast a spell or not cast a spell? Because we're not going to cast spells for everything. I mean, let's face it, if somebody's rude to you on the street, you're not going to cast a spell. If you are in the line of a major storm, you may want to cast a spell of protection on your home, on yourself, on the people that you love with their permission. So you have to decide when are the times that merit a spell. It takes energy, it takes time, takes focus and will. So you're not going to do it all day, every day. When are the good times to do it? So when basically, again, sometimes you need a power tool and sometimes you just need a screwdriver. You don't need to have that kind of power every single time. Sometimes you just need a little thing. Somebody is asking, is it true spells cannot cast oceans? How far are they can they go when they're intended to help other beings? Well, there is a certain mythology that said that magic couldn't pass running water. As far as I can tell, that really is just legend. That was something that was supposed to say protect you from the Fae or whatever. I believe that spells can go wherever you send them, and yes, it may take a little more oomph to send them across an ocean, but I don't think it's going to stop anything. Air travels everywhere, and also deity is everywhere. So if you're sending a spell out that says, "Goddess, please help my friend who's in England," the goddess is as much in England as she is here. So there really are no distance limits. Yep, ley lines. There are a lot of ways for energy to travel. My group, Blue Moon Circle, and I often do rituals where we send things up into the universe. We may send it up on smoke from the bonfire. We may blow bubbles and send those out. Once they're in the air, they can keep going. They're not necessarily going to stop a block from my house. So, yeah, that you don't have to worry about. I mean, you can worry about anything you want, but it would be sort of a waste of time. Okay, so when do you want to cast a spell? When you've exhausted all the mundane options, when you've done all of the things that you can do as a regular person, but you still need to achieve a goal, because the spell not only puts your intention out into the universe, but it's also a way of asking for help from a power greater than yourself. When the spell will affect only you, such as casting a spell to open yourself to love. Again, this is one of the things that every book that I include spells in, I always say, don't cast love spells. Ask me how I know. I'm not going to go into details. They will come back and bite you. And again, it's interfering with free will. If you are casting a spell to make somebody love you, interfering with free will, and then how will you know if they really love you or if they just love you because you cast a spell on them? So if you want to cast a love spell, cast a spell to open yourself to love. You can ask the gods to send you, the person who will make your life better, whatever you want to do. But, that's, if you're going to cast a spell, make sure that it only affects you or somebody who has given you permission. To cast a spell, you want to make sure you know what you want and you're willing to do the work that is required to get it. Because here's the thing people don't always understand about spellcasting. It isn't just that you cast the spell, put it out into the universe, and then you go read a good book or play games on your phone. No. You have to follow up a spell with concrete, positive action in the real world. Say you do a spell to get a great job. You hate the job you've got now. You want a job that will be satisfying and, give you more money, let you, stay home with your kids, whatever it is. So once you've cast that spell, you can't just sit down and do nothing. You still have to put out resumes. You still have to network. You still have to, do whatever it is you would do in the normal mundane world. The spell just gives you that added little oomph and maybe increases your chances that it will succeed. And when only good will come from the spell. That's another limitation for me. When not to cast a spell. When there's a simple solution that doesn't require magic. Say you need to lose 10 pounds. You don't need to cast a spell for that. You need to eat better, maybe exercise a little bit more, and, do all of those mundane things. Ask me how I know. On the other hand, if you've been trying to lose weight and you're doing all the right things already and it's not working, then you can maybe cast a spell to, help with your willpower or, make lettuce tastier. Luckily, I like lettuce. But you don't need to cast a spell when there is a simple, practical solution that you can do just the same as anybody else. Don't cast a spell if it would interfere with free will. Yeah, nag, 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 nag. I'm going to keep saying that. Don't cast a spell when you are not sure what you really want to achieve. You really need to know what it is you want. If you're not sure yet, then, use my tarot cards and figure it out. But you don't want to put a spell out if you cannot focus on what it is you want. So that means you need to stop first and figure out what your goal really is. So why would you create your own spell? Okay, we have all these wonderful books that have spells in them already. And absolutely, if you don't feel great about, what is the name of my book? Which book? I have like 17. And that's just the nonfiction. If you're talking about Llewellyn's Little Book of Spellcraft, there's that. There's also the Everyday Witch A to Z spell book, which is one of my earlier ones. And that contains my very favorite spell, which is the Jerk Avoidance spell. That one has a whole lot of cool spells that are not just your average, stuff for love and money and all the rest of it. But if you create your own spell, then you're putting even more of your own energy into it. And you can be sure that you're asking for exactly what it is you're asking for. Now, you get my spellcrafting book and you find a spell that's really close to what you want, but it isn't quite there. It's fine to change it. I have no problem with you changing the words of my spells. They're just there as a place to start. You can either use them as is, you can switch them up, when they don't quite suit you. Not everybody is comfortable writing spells. Now, I do, in the new book, I talk a lot about how to write spells and, you know, the ways to do that. We're already running out of time. I'm talking as fast as I know how. But so one of the things you want to do before you cast a spell, whether it's one you wrote yourself or whether it's one of mine, is you want to set a goal. You want to make sure that that goal is very clear in your head. Um, and, you know, then if you're going to be using what I call optional ingredients, you're going to want to figure out what those are and gather them together. The use of optional ingredients, things like stones, and yes, I'm a crystal junkie. I have a house full of crystals. I use them with my spell casting. I do energy healing work. I use them with that. They do all have individual, you know, their own feel for power, you know, for energy. So there are some spells, you know, some that are better for spells for energy, some that are better for spells for healing, that kind of thing. But there's also herbs, you know, there's incense, there's candles. We have a lot of tools, and most of us really like playing with the tools. So that's not a bad thing. But the tools have a purpose, and their purpose is to help us focus as we're doing the spell. Oh, Joel wants to know where my necklace is from. I made it. I made jewelry for like 30 years. So yeah, I have a few pieces on my Etsy shop, but mostly I've given it up because I'm busy writing. You people can't have everything. What was I saying? My brain just went, so where was I? So focus is really important. And if you are fairly new to spellcasting, or if you are someone who has problems focusing, which lots of people do, you know, there are folks with ADHD, there are folks who have all sorts of issues. And frankly, most of us are tired and frazzled and, you know, have way too much on our plates. And all of those things can make it hard to focus, which is why we use these tools. You know, we use some sort of sacred smoke maybe to start off our ritual to remind us that we're going into sacred space. We use things that represent earth, air, fire, and water to help us connect with. I'm full of surprises. Oh, you have no idea. But, you know, helps us connect with the elements. Yeah, they're fun. They're great house decor, right, Philip? Yeah, and some of them you can just have sitting around, even if you are not out of the broom closet. You know, you can have candles. Nobody needs to know they're witchy tools. You can have stones. Nobody needs to know they're witchy tools. So if you're going to be doing a spell and you feel the need to help focus, or you just like to have the cool stuff, which I do, then you can gather all of the things that are going to help your spell. And if you are not familiar with, say, the correspondences that, you know, which stone is good for which kind of spell and which herb is good for which kind of spell, you can look in my books. It's in a lot of my books. And there, you know, Scott Cunningham, there are a lot of authors who really have great sources for correspondences. Are there any resources I know of for teaching children about spellcraft in a safe and interesting way without affecting their free will? Well, working with children is a whole nother tricky thing. One of the women in my coven has been bringing her children since they were literally in the womb. You know, we passed them around the circle when they were babies and she was breastfeeding. And the oldest one is getting ready to graduate from high school, and I don't understand how that's possible. But she always allowed them to have their own free will, but she would explain things to them very simply. We would make sure that anything we were doing in circle was child safe and was not very intense energy. So there are ways to do it. There are, I think, a few books put out by people who tell you how to practice with children. That is not my area of expertise because all of my children are cats. Well, actually, that's a lie. My stepdaughter's out in California, and I did actually, she came to my group for many years, but not as a small child because I hadn't found witchcraft then. All right, I seriously need to wind this up. So, okay, you've got your goal, you've got your ingredients, and then you're going to want to create a safe, sacred space. And that can be as simple as standing in the middle of your living room or outside or in front of your altar if you happen to have one, and visualizing yourself surrounded by white light. That's it. If you're good at concentrating and focusing, that's it. Or you can call the quarters and invoke the goddesses and the god and goddess, and do all of that kind of stuff. So obviously we are running out of time. I have pages of more things to cover, but I guess we'll have to give a part 2 sometime. I will probably do an online class at some point. Every once in a while I give like a tarot basics class or whatever. So do we have any questions about all of my babbling before we disappear? Yeah, if you want to find out about, yes, biggest takeaway, consent is key to magic. Absolutely true. So if you want to find me online to ask me more questions, my website is deborahblakeauthor.com. Very tricky and hard to find, not at all. And it's got links to, Instagram and all the other places that I am. I have a Patreon, and people there have more access to me, and I post spells and sneak peeks and tarot things. But yeah, if I decide to give another class, I will post about it online. So if you're following me anywhere, I also have a newsletter. You can go to my website, sign up for that, and then I will tell you things. Oh, great. I did answer questions. It's so much to cover that I really worried that I wasn't going to be able to get you guys enough information. If you need more, Llewellyn's Little Book of Spellcraft, July 8th, she said, posting about her book. Is there time to tell us what the book generally covers? I don't know. Let me look. Obviously it's got a bunch of spells in it, and there's fun activities and tips. Spellcrafting basics, casting a spell, how to create your own spells, spellcrafting tools, lunar spells, seasonal spells, spells for love, friendship, and joy, spells for prosperity and success. Lots of spells in this one. And then even some meditations and prayers. So it's basically a how-to, but then there's also a whole bunch of spells that you can use. So yeah, it was a fun book to write. Every time I write a book that is about a topic I've written about before, I try and make it a little bit different. Sometimes there's some overlap because the basics are the basics. But yay for people who've pre-ordered the book. We love pre-orders. Pre-orders are the best. Subscribe to my newsletter. I love you people. But yeah, you can find me online. I always answer questions. When people email me or they message me on Facebook or whatever, if I see it, which, Facebook, I will always answer a question. So if there's something that occurs to you later, oh, love the new Oracle deck. Thank you. We're so proud of it. It's really wonderful. So yeah, feel free to chase me down on the interwebs and say, hey, I thought of something after the class was over. Can you answer this question? And I'll say, no, I won't say that. So yeah, I thank you so much, all of you, for coming out on a Saturday when you probably had fun other things to do. I went to the dump right before this. My life is extremely exotic and glamorous. Yeah, it is not. Yeah, go ahead and, get the coupon and go buy a lot of books. I have a lot of books. Books are good. Buy a lot of decks. I think it works for the decks too. And thank you all again so much for coming out and joining me on this Saturday, when you could have been, I'm sure, doing something else fun. You guys are the very best.